Hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of this sub-series in the Gateways podcast, in which I am discussing mainly the how to identify what musical culture a piece is from, based on what is being heard. Now today I will be going over world music, as previously I went over mainly Western music and how to identify all the different genres within that, but it's also important to be able to understand if a piece is coming from a culture from a different area of the world. I will be going over the music of India, China, Japan, Indonesia, Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, Europe, Australia, and lastly I'll be going over some examples of fusion which should be kept in mind when you are studying for this exam. So to begin, in India, the oldest type of music, known as Carnatican or Indian classical music, is known as the raga. It's associated a lot with the Hindu religion and is very important. This name raga is also given to the scales they use to improvise melodies, which is similar to Western scales in that they both have ascending and descending forms, but the pitches used can be very different. They are created for certain times of day or seasons. Many have been written with particular moons or occasions, etc. Rhythms are based upon patterns known as tala, which have odd meters and are used as a basis for improvisation. And then the two elements are accompanied by a drone of 2 to 3 principal notes from the raga scale. Some traditional instruments include the sitar, which is a plucked guitar-like instrument with 7 main strings and several sympathetic strings, the tabla, which is a pair of single-headed drums, and the tambura, which is a smaller plucked string instrument with 4 strings, which plays the drone. Now a typical raga performance consists of 4 structural points: the alap, which is when the notes of the raga scale are slowly introduced one by one, with no fixed rhythm or tempo; the jor, in which a regular pulse is added; the gat, which is when the tabla enters, improvising on the tala rhythm, while the sitar improvises on the raga scale; and the jala, which is the tempo increase and the rhythm becomes more complex to create an exciting finish. Now in place of the sitar you can also have the sarod, which is a plucked string instrument without frets, and the sarangi, which is played with a bow. It's also closely associated with Indian vocal music. Now, another very common style of music is Bhangra, which is a lively folk dance originating from Punjab. And the main element in that style of music is dotted, shuffle-like rhythm of the tol, which is a large double-headed drum played with wooden sticks. Moving on, we have the music of China. Traditional Chinese music dates about 2,000 years, including dance and entertainment at the imperial court, as well as accompanying Chinese opera. Most melodies are based off of the pentatonic scale and can either be performed solo or in groups using a heterophonic texture. There's sometimes single part harmony in parallel thirds or fourths. Ensembles are often made up of 4 sections: woodwind with bamboo flutes, bowed string section with various instruments such as the erhu, a plucked string instrument such as the guzhang, and the percussion section with drums and the brass sounding cymbals typical of the region. So moving forward, in Japan, the styles of music of traditional Japan are very similar to that of Chinese music, largely because Japan was also ruled for centuries by an imperial system. Japan mainly uses 2 scales: the yo scale, which has no semitones and was felt to sound bright, an example of which would be D, F, G, A, C, and the in scale, which includes semitones and sounded dark, for example D, E flat, G, A, B flat. Bamboo flutes were also present, whereas in China they were known as bamboo flutes. In Japan they were known as the shakuhachi, and they were played by court, folk musicians, and Buddhist monks. The most important folk traditions in Japan are the minyo, which are solo songs accompanied by 1 or 2 shamisen, which is a plucked string instrument with 3 strings, and a koto, which is a zither-like instrument, very similar to the guzhang. The biwahoshi, which is a form of narrative song, featuring a solo performer telling epic tales in a part-sung, part-spoken manner, and taiko, which is a large barrel-shaped drum in various sizes, played with a pair of thick wooden sticks. Moving on from Japan, we have the music of Indonesia, who are known for their gamelan orchestras. Now, the instruments in these orchestras are often tuned percussion. They're made of metal or wooden bars and played with wooden mallets. For example, you have the sarun, which is one of the smaller metallophones. You have the bolnang, which is slightly larger than the sarun, and they play an offbeat counter melody that interlocks with the onbeat sarun part. And you have gongs, which is the largest tuned percussion, and they play an important role marking the start and end points of each repetition. Now, there are various other types of instruments used in this style of music, such as the bamboo, flute, fiddles, and the voice. Music is directed by a drummer, which is very important to keep in mind. Many pieces use a pentatonic scale called slendro, in which the exact tuning varies from one island to another. The closest equivalent in Western notation is C, D, F, G, A, and another more chromatic scale known as the pelog is also used. An example in Western notation being D, E flat, F, G sharp, A, B flat, C. Many ensembles lack the fourth and seventh, which is important to keep in mind. Next, we have Latin America. We'll be discussing it country to country, well, region to region more so, rather than discussing the entire area as a whole. So, in Argentina, it's known for the tango, which is a style of dance that was a fusion of styles introduced. It has the rhythmic and melodic elements from Eastern Europe, the polka and mazurka, Spain, the flamenco, and Cuba, the habanera. The 4/4 meter often has a distinctive offbeat accent after the fourth beat, commonly emphasized by a snare drum roll. And you also have distinctive sound played on the bandoneon, which is a type of concertina controlled by buttons rather than piano keys. Now, across the Andes Mountains, you have several countries such as Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. And Andean folk music features indigenous instruments such as the panpipes, as well as the Spanish guitar. Folk melodies in this style of music are often split between two panpipe players, known as a hocket, and these bands consistently played at parties and weddings. Brazil is known for the samba, which is a party dance that has almost become national culture on its own. It has a solid tempo of 2/4. A large group of different percussion instruments are present, beat out rhythmic counterpoint of accents and syncopated patterns. They often consist of surdo, bass drums, caixa, snare drums, quichua, tom-toms, and tamborims, which are tambourines but without the small cymbals along the outer rim. Now, music in Mexico has a long and diverse history, but the most common is the mariachi. Mariachi typically contains trumpets, violins, and 3 different sides of guitar, and every single member of a mariachi is able to sing. They're usually hired for special occasions because most of their traditional songs are about love and romance, which is very important to keep in mind. Now, the islands of the Caribbean are a perfect example of how different cultural traditions have been fused. Nowhere is this truer than in Cuba, where European melody and harmony were combined with African percussion and polyrhythm to create many Latin dances. So in Cuba, dances such as the habanera, which is a 2/4 style dance, where the main beats are decorated with syncopation, styled rhythms, and triplets. The salsa, which is a fusion of several Cuban dances, and uses a distinctive syncopated 4/4 rhythm called son clave, and it has a trademark percussion section of bongos, congas, claves, and timbales. And you have the cha-cha-cha, which is a less syncopated dance in 4/4. And then you have the island of Trinidad, which used oil drums and turned them into steel pans, which formed an important part of the calypso sound. Now, these steel bands were made up of a choir of pans, known for the different vocal ranges, plus a percussion section. And the melodic and harmonic elements are derived from Europe, as the melodies are mainly stepwise with few leaps and chromatic decorations. Harmony is primarily diatonic chords. Moving on from that, you now have the Middle East, which covers a vast region. The most common music it's known for is its call to prayer. However, music is also used for dance and entertainment. The melodic scale, similar to that found in Carnatic music, has up to 24 notes in an octave, which often results due to subtle changes in pitch. Psalms typically have 4 players. It's mainly monophonic in texture, accompanied by single percussion such as drums and finger cymbals. Rhythm can be complex with odd meters, accents, syncopations, and the patterns are memorized. An example of a well-known instrument is the oud, O-U-D, which is a lute-like instrument with 4 to 6 strings. There are also some woodwind instruments, such as the ney, N-E-Y, which is similar to the flute made of cane, and various oboe-like double reed instruments. Now moving on from there, you have the culture of Africa, which in the context of this general view will be divided into northern and sub-Saharan Africa. The music of the north has been influenced by a succession of different civilizations and occupying powers, such as ancient Egypt, the Greeks, and the Romans. It's now more closely related to Middle Eastern tradition. On the contrary, sub-Saharan Africa is mostly functional, with a lot of work songs and songs based on occasion. It's best known for its rhythmic features such as odd meter, syncopation, the layering of different patterns over one another, otherwise known as polyrhythms, etc. Ensembles are led by a master drummer who sets the tempo and calls the changes in the music. There are a vast array of African percussion instruments, drums, bells, xylophones, and shakers. For example, the djembe is D-J-E-M-B-E, is a single-headed drum with a wooden shell. You also have the talking drum, which is a double-headed drum with strings connecting the 2 heads, whose pitch can be precisely altered by squeezing the strings as the drum is played. There are a lot of melodic instruments, which resemble flutes, trumpets, and violins, but the voice is most important in this style of music, and it is known for, in terms of vocals, it's known for its call and response texture, with simple harmony and thirds, as well as vocal techniques such as melisma and yodeling. Now, in Europe, there are many forms of different folk music. In the United Kingdom, you have British folk music, which is modal. Melodies tend to have a 1-octave range and are occupied by simple diatonic chords. You also have region-specific instruments, such as Scottish bagpipes, the Welsh harp, and the Irish fiddle, and the bodhran, which is a large shallow drum played with a single double-ended stick. You also have a number of different genres, including Moors dancing, sea shanties, and brass bands. In Spain, you have the music of the flamenco, which became known around the world, with the main elements being the rapid picking and strumming technique of the guitar, and the emotional and high-pitched singing style, and the percussion, which much of which is performed by the dancers through stomping, hand clapping, and castanets. And then in Eastern Europe, you have a lot of different dance forms, such as the 2/4 polka and the 3/4 mazurka. In Australia, you have the music of the Aboriginal people, known mainly for its use of the didgeridoo worldwide. The didgeridoo is a cylindrical piece of hardwood which produces a drone, which can be modified by the performer using vocal and breathing techniques. The voice can be used simultaneously while playing to mimic animal calls. It's still very important in their culture, and it's often accompanied by clapsticks, which are a pair of wooden sticks hit together like clavis. And lastly, something to keep in mind is that, at least in examination and in analyzing music generally, music will often incorporate elements from multiple styles simultaneously. That's even seen in general musical culture as a whole, with a lot of Latin American music being derived from the movement of the Europeans, as well as those who were taken from Africa to that region, and it spread via the ports. So some examples of pieces of music which I would recommend looking into, I would recommend, that the IB Music Revision Guide would recommend looking into if you are attempting to analyze and discover cultural fusion would be The African Sanctus, which is a mass written by David Fashwe in the 1970s, which combines a 4-part soprano, alto, tenor, bass choir with a rock band and recordings of traditional African music. You have the Afro-Celt Sound System, which is a group formed in the 1990s who blend electronic dance rhythms with traditional Irish and West African music. You have Graceland, which is an album released by Paul Simon in 1986, which brought a number of Southern African musical traditions to a global audience and combined them with Western pop and rock. You have Shang Shang Typhoon, which is a Japanese band formed in the 1980s, which blend traditional minyo singing with Western pop, rock, and reggae. And you have the Bhangra, which was mentioned previously, which is a fusion of Punjabi music and songs with Western pop, rock, and dance elements. So that's it for this sub-series on discussing the key features of musical culture and understanding in brief musical history so that it can be applied in the analysis of musical pieces. Thank you for listening.